Good afternoon and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinar Series, our premier digital platform featuring a variety of programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where you need it most. My name is Brian Gilbert, the events manager here at NCIA, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to another edition of our Service Solutions series today, being presented by NexTec Group and their CannaBusiness Enterprise Resource Planning Solution. If you're just joining us, please stay on the lookout for housekeeping notes to be shared via the chat window from here on out, so we're not taking up any more valuable time with routine info. But if you have any questions for our team on how to participate in this virtual event, please message myself or the co-panelist Brooke Gilbert, NCIA's Director of Events and Education, at any time via a private message in the Zoom webinar platform. Now, let's get this show on the road. In this edition of our Service Solutions series, we're joined by NexTec Group and OGen Cannabis for an in-depth look at the benefits provided by implementing an enterprise resource planning solution into your cannabis business. As you all know, cannabis cultivators and processors are faced with unique challenges as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and managing risk in this uncertain environment is one of the key values that an enterprise resource planning solution brings to maintaining business continuity. We're super thrilled to be joined by two experts this afternoon who will identify those unique risks and demonstrate how they can be overcome with the help of this unique service solution. I'd like to welcome Jennifer Spanos, Head of Vertical Business Solutions at NexTec, and Darren Brisbois with OGen Cannabis to the virtual stage. How are you all doing this afternoon? You can activate your videos and your mics now.
Hi, Brian.
Perfect.
How you doing?
We're doing great. How are
Hi,
you
Brian.
doing, Jennifer and Darren?
Pretty well, thanks.
Perfect. Well,
Good, thank you.
Before we kick things off, why don't we tell the audience a little bit more about your backgrounds and expertise? Starting with Jennifer, she has 14 plus years in the food and beverage as well as cannabis manufacturing, software, and operations fields. After graduating with a food science degree, Jennifer worked in the food industry, where she spent a number of years in the compliance and new product development, working to maximize the efficiency and profitability of customers' businesses. Jennifer is responsible for NexTec's vertical business products and solutions, including CannaBusiness ERP. Darren Brisbois serves as the president of OGen Cannabis and has been involved with the cannabis industry since 2015. He's an accountant by trade and has 10 years experience in banking, financial consultant, and business valuation. We're very excited to have both of you joining us this afternoon to present today's session entitled Service Solutions, Managing Cannabis Business Operations During a Crisis, being presented by NexTec Group and CannaBusiness ERP. We'll turn it over to you all to kick things off, Jennifer, so you can please activate your screen share now and take it away from here.
Thanks, Brian. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Looks good on my end.
All right. So thanks for that introduction. As Brian said, I am the head of vertical business solutions here at NexTec. And what that really means is that it's my job to make sure that we understand the industries that we deal with and serve, right? It really allows us to help navigate some of the challenges together and to offer some real world expertise when it comes to a software solution. So I maintain strategic industry focus, and we make sure that we're continuously learning and trying to understand the regulations and changes that go on so that we can work the best with our customers. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. So I'm going to start off by talking about the market, right? What are the changes that we see in the market? How is the consumer base shifting and that kind of thing? And how is that framed by COVID? So how has that impacted things and served to accelerate some of the changes that we see in the market today? Then I'm going to turn it over to Darren, who will talk about OGen and his role within that company. And then we're going to go back and forth, and I'm going to ask him to share with us some of the challenges that he has faced or that their company has faced and how they've gotten through those, overcome them, and what solutions they see for the long term. Then we'll wrap it up by telling you a bit about CannaBusiness ERP, which is our offering and solution, and of course about us at NexTec Group. And we'll open it up for some Q&A at the end. So let's get started. So we wanted to start with this slide and this quote because I think it's a pretty good opener for the way that things are happening right now, right? Overall, we've seen kind of this pandemic effect industry, and specifically the cannabis industry, in a way that's going to change that landscape for the long term. So a lot of changes were happening anyway, right? We saw sort of this shift from a growth type of market or environment to one that is now moving towards an operation type mindset, right? So there was this huge surge, a lot of people entered it in the beginning, and now we're shifting towards kind of the maturation of that business model and making sure that people actually are starting to optimize their business and run it in a more profitable way. Now, what happened in the beginning was a lot of people kind of jumped on that bandwagon and entered into the industry perhaps without a good plan, sometimes without sort of the business knowledge needed to survive as a business, as any business would. And so what we'll see is that some of those businesses will go out of business. And really what's happened with the pandemic is there's been some acceleration of that shift, right? It's put a lot of pressure on these smaller businesses or on businesses that may not be quite stable yet. And it's predicted that a number of them, unfortunately, will go out of business. Now, that being said, it's not entirely bad news because it means that for those of us that weather the storm and come out of it on the other side, they will come out stronger and in an environment where there's less competition and there's the opportunity to increase prices, right? So overall, when we look at the need to show profitability and a gain in revenue, what we want to do is be able to increase prices and have less competition because that leads to an increase in profit margins. So let's have a look at the market itself. When we look at market dynamics, the global cannabis market is expected to reach in and around the neighborhood of, let's say, 97 billion globally by the end of 2026. Now, that's dependent on who you talk to. There's different predictions. As we all know, the market goes up and down, and especially this market tends to have a lot of variability in it, right? There's a lot of highs and lows that go along with this. But overall, in spite of this kind of bumpy path with a lot of highs and lows, it's still predicted to have a fairly good compound annual growth rate, right? Ranging between about 20 to 33%, depending on who you talk to, again. So overall, right, in spite of some bumps in the road, it will be a strong market, right? It's coming out of it. New geographies are opening up. New states are getting legislated. And so the market is, in fact, growing steadily over time. It's just, it may not be a smooth path to get there. When we look at consumer habits are interesting. So we still see kind of the most majorly consumed type of product being flower and bud. But what we also see is that we have an increase in the consumer base. So we have a new set of consumers that is now looking for familiarity in a way. So that consumer set, which of course is additional to the one that was already there, is looking for products that are perceived to be safe, discreet, things that are easy to use, have accurate dosing, and that kind of thing, because it's a little more familiar to them, right? So people that may not have tried smoking before or are averse to it are looking for things like edibles and beverages, topicals, concentrates, because it's a little more familiar to them and they view it as a safer option. Now, those consumers are also looking for kind of this curated experience that goes along with it. So we're seeing a shift now to this kind of high quality product that is a little more high end as well, and that has a very curated experience that goes along with it. So it's not necessarily your pre-rolls and stuff like that. We're looking at a shift to things that are sort of a blended experience, right? So that you can really determine how you're going to feel and what that overall experience will be. And so with that, we see kind of more sophisticated packaging, advertising. We look at our high-end dispensaries, and again, that's contributing to that overall consumer experience. And it's an interesting move in the market. So it's moving kind of away from a price sensitivity, although cost, of course, is still important from an operational perspective, but it's moving to somewhere where people are more willing to pay a higher price for higher quality. And that's important, right? Because overall, from an industry perspective, that means that we can achieve higher margins from that. So that's a good thing. It also means that from a dispensary standpoint, these kind of higher end, very experienced central dispensaries are becoming more and more important. Now, if we frame this in the pandemic, there's been an impact here, because what's had to happen is that, of course, the dispensary side of the experience has changed, right? When we look at a lot of the geographies that we deal in, of course, the dispensaries have had to shut their doors, sometimes permanently, sometimes temporarily, and move to kind of this curbside pickup model or online model. And that in and of itself has challenges. So we've seen a lot of our customers have to put almost everything else on hold, so all their other initiatives on hold, and pivot to be able to really move to that online presence. And the challenge there is not only from an operational standpoint, right, being able to take orders and move material, but it's really also from a customer experience perspective, something that's more challenging, right? It's harder to retain your consumer or your customer when they're online. There's a lot more points in that process where they can turn around and decide not to buy something, right? How many times have you kind of gone online shopping and selected a bunch of stuff, left it in your cart, and then left, right? I know I have. It's something that's, you know, from an online perspective, something that we need to be very mindful of. So what that means is that those experiences need to be very effective. So they need to be able to replicate or exceed the experience that somebody had had from a dispensary. And that in and of itself has been a big challenge that we've seen a lot of people putting a lot of resources towards in order to overcome. Overall, we see sales have gone up. Now, this is spread across the entire market, and there are some exceptions to that. So we look at an increase of sales of at least 20% across the board, ranging up to about 54%. Now, that's mostly in dried cannabis flower, which has lower margins, but that speaks to kind of that existing consumer base that was already comfortable with the product and was already consuming it, right? Not that kind of newer space that we were looking at before. Now, the exceptions to that, of course, are in some of those states or locations that are heavily tourism dependent, right? So we look at, for example, Nevada, and we see a significant drop there because a lot of their consumer base came from people that were tourists, right, or traveling there. So that's had a kind of a bad impact or a difficult impact on some of those places. But overall, sales are up, which is a good thing. We see retailers placing larger orders, but less frequently, which has a bit of a silver lining because it can be easier to manage inventory that way. And then, of course, we talked about the shift to kind of the online or curbside pickup model. Now, what's happened as well, which has been a really good thing, I think, for the industry in general, is that there's this declaration of cannabis as essential in a lot of different places. And so that has had kind of a paradigm shift, I would say, and has accelerated the positive view of the cannabis industry in general, right? What we're doing there is we're recognizing the health benefits and the need for public access across the board. And so that part of it has been a really important shift. And there's a lot of improvements there that can happen. Now, the flip side is that because of the pandemic, legislation is moving pretty slowly, right? So we look at federal lawmakers, for example, that are focused on pressing public health issues, right? Rightly so. But so that's making things move more slowly. But I think when they start to pick up and move again, we're in a better position to move it along because there's already been kind of this implied acceptance in a lot of different places where there wasn't before. And it also speaks to, the public embracing this industry and business, and that's a really good thing. Now, the other thing that's happening is supply chain, right? So we hear a lot of talk about supply chain, and that's impacting in a few different ways. So from a purely operational perspective, right, we see supply chain issues with things like packaging, with things like hardware, equipment maintenance and parts, that kind of thing, which is an impact in and of itself. But it also affects the economy from a broader standpoint. And so for this industry specifically, when we look at how heavily we have investors involved in this industry, right? A lot of companies have outside investors. It becomes more difficult to enter the market because those investors are being more conservative right now. Because the supply chain is not able to necessarily pay their bills, right? It means that they're kind of looking at things from a tighter perspective. They're not as willing to fund new organizations. They're not as willing to invest where they were a little looser with it before. So overall, that's helping to contract the business landscape a little bit, right? So that helps to accelerate, like we talked about before, where we have some companies that are not able to enter the market. And then we have additional pressure. So faster, harder pressure to really run businesses in a more profitable way. And so that's going to be kind of an important theme as we go on. So when we look at operational challenges within cannabis, right? So kind of from a more of a micro level, let's say, keeping production on track is always going to be top of mind, right? And that's the same really with any business. We need to keep production on track. We need to be able to ship product out the door. We need to be able to sell what we have. And so anything that impacts that is going to have ramifications throughout the business, right? So we've had some things happen that are impacting that. Definitely we've had ups and downs in demand. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we had this big surge in demand. A lot of people were really looking to stockpile in some cases. So, there were lineups, there was inventory issues because people were really seeing that as essential already, even before it was deemed as such, and making sure that they had enough to get them through things. Now, that means that businesses had to shift their production model in order to keep up with that demand, right? But now we see an excess in supply in some locations as well. So definitely in Canada, there's definitely some excess supply going on. And we all know that in this industry, we don't want to have excess supply, right? Because inventory is perishable. It's not going to last forever. And we need to make sure that we're able to sell that inventory because certainly we don't want to have to destroy it. So overall, it's been difficult, I think, for the industry to react in those quick pivots in demand that we see. We talked a little bit about challenges with hardware, packaging. So a lot of that packaging is really coming from Asia, right? So I think Darren's going to talk about that a little bit further on. But when we have packaging that's coming from overseas and the global supply chain is in a difficult position and not necessarily meeting that demand, it means either businesses have had to stock up and plan ahead, or they're left without the packaging that they need, and then they have to be able to change direction, find alternate suppliers, and find different ways of doing things. And when you layer compliance requirements on top of that, it becomes very difficult. Additionally, we look at things like equipment, right? So maintenance, parts, people to work on that equipment has been in short supply. And so what we see, and what we see in our customer base as well, is that people have had to adapt to that. They've had to put alternative solutions in place and perhaps produce in a way that, is not what they thought they would be doing. So it's a little bit different. They've had to find different ways to do things and react to those changes. And then we look at the workforce. And I know Darren, again, has a good story to tell about the workforce and the challenges that they went through there. But really what we see here is that the workforce is, there's a lot of challenges, right? So when we look at kind of this landscape, we saw this challenge in the industry before the pandemic hit. So already there was stress on the industry to streamline their operations to make things more profitable. And that resulted in a lot of layoffs from a lot of different companies, right? So we sort of started this by having challenges in the workforce in the first place. So employees have had to adapt to working with less people, right? They've had to learn new skill sets sometimes. They had to do more when they didn't have to do it before. And overall, that leads to a decrease in morale, right? There's uncertainty about their jobs, and it's a difficult kind of place to be. So then on top of that, now we've got the pandemic where people they're grateful to have a job, but they're anxious about returning to work. They don't know if it's safe. They don't know if their coworkers might get sick. They don't know if there's going to be an outbreak, which unfortunately there has been in some cases. And then they've got different working conditions again, right? So we've got some of this offset in working conditions, times, different distances that you have to stay from people. And so layered on top of that, when we already had kind of, challenges with morale, anxiety, uncertainty, now we've got even more anxiety, people that are concerned about coming back to work and not having the same camaraderie that they once had with their coworkers. So it's been a lot, I think, for people to deal with. Now, coming out of it, I think it's becoming a little more normal now, if we can ever call it that. But again, some of it's long-term changes, some of it may revert. But overall, there's been the pace of change and adaptation has been very high, and that's always challenging. So finally, when we look at this stuff, right, it's also forced businesses to be more mindful about how they operate. So whenever we're in this kind of pressure cooker situation, where we have a lot of things happening at once, a lot of pressure to be not only profitable, but to get through it as a business, right, be successful, manage expectations with shareholders or investors, all that kind of stuff, it forces companies to take a hard look at some of the risks that they've incurred and how they may overcome those risks or mitigate that. And so really what it does is it forges a new normal. It forces attention to detail in a business that may not have been there before. And so when we talk about accelerating some of those changes, this has worked to do that because it forces companies in this industry to look at some things that they may not have thought of before, right? What are risks that we can try and address or have a plan for going forward? And when you're in a period of high growth, you don't always look at that kind of stuff, right? You're busy just trying to keep up. You're busy trying to grow your business, gain new market share and all that kind of stuff. But now we're in a position where we have to actively manage the risk, things like cash flow, financials, planning that goes along with it so that you're able to navigate and really move forward in a better way. So overall, when we look at this, right, we've got, again, this pressure cooker accelerated landscape. So changes that were happening in the industry have been forced at a faster pace. We see some companies that may go out of business. We see challenges in terms of the workforce for sure. But there's also a lot of good that can come out of this, right? So we see companies that will come out of the other side stronger, more savvy in their business plans, more profitable. There's the opportunity for decreased competition and increased profit. And it's accelerated some of the change that we knew should happen anyway. So overall, I think that the industry is going to come out of it stronger, deemed essential, with a better outlook. Overall, the public will view them in a different way. And so although it's hard now, I think there's a bright future to come. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Darren, and he can change pace a little bit and tell us about Ogen and his role within it.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So Ogen was founded in 2013 in Calgary, Canada. We're a federally licensed producer, or an LP, through Health Canada. We're actually right in the Calgary city limits, about 15 minutes away from downtown Calgary. So we're an urban indoor cultivator. We produce in a about 60,000 square feet pharmaceutical grade footprint in craft small sized flowering rooms. So our flowering rooms are about between 1,000 and 1,500 square feet. We only hang dry and we hand trim all of our buds. So we don't use any automation on the post-harvest side of things. We currently sell high quality flower, and we are expanding into concentrates here in the new year. We distribute provincially through retail partners and medically and wholesale through other distribution channel partners. So yeah, I'm the president of the company and very proud to be involved in the cannabis industry. So thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome, and we're proud to work with you too. Certainly your company is positioned for kind of this growing consumer base that is very interested in high quality and kind of that craft experience. I think it's a pretty good place for you to be. And of course, we've worked together for a while now, and we are always happy to work with you. So thank you for joining us on this. We do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I talked at kind of a higher level about some of the challenges that the industry is facing, both from a market perspective and also operationally. So, you know, I know that you and I have talked about this before, Darren. Maybe you could kind of give us the story about what happened when the pandemic hit Ogen, because you had to go through some pretty big hurdles in order to keep the business moving, and some pretty big changes within that time period as well.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. I mean, you hear a lot about the increased demand for products at the retail stores, but you hear a little bit less about the difficulties on creating that supply. And as a licensed producer, that's really where we sit. So for us too, the pandemic, and for a lot of people, there was no good time for the pandemic, but it came at exactly the wrong time for us. At the end of last year, we were cultivating in approximately 15,000 square feet. And we literally finished all of our licensing and had the keys for our shiny new second phase. We took possession in February of 2020. So, you know, in February, we were working through getting all the mother plants in the new rooms, cloning thousands and thousands of clones, hiring a bunch of people, and then the world just stopped for us. So, you know, we made the decision very early in COVID to essentially stop a lot of different parts of the business that we had the ability to, including packaging and trimming. So we have a lot of employees that are working in close quarters. So, you know, staff safety and their health was, you know, paramount for us. So we actually, you know, in cutting out those activities, we had to temporarily lay off a lot of employees. So it's been quite a rocky road for us, 2020. So at the end of 2019, we had about 28 employees. We started ramping up in anticipation for our second phase, which we were moving into presumably in March of 2020. So by the time the pandemic hit, we had about 42 employees. Now, a good portion of our employees were temporarily laid off. Some were working from home. And we really stayed bare bones for about a month and a half, you know, 45, 50 days. And then slowly started bringing back people. You know, some people, when we called them back, did not report back to work for their own reasons. But in the month of June, we made the decision to start ramping up our second phase again. So, you know, the month of June, July, and August have been ramping up our second phase. And we're sitting here, our first crops from phase 2 started coming off at the end of August, mid-end of August. So we're sitting here almost the end of September, and all of my phase 2 crops are just starting to come, you know, out of trimming, out of testing, and we're, you know, getting prepared to send them to market. So it's been a really interesting couple of months for us, Jennifer. And now we're up to about approximately 75 employees. So from May, June until end of August, you know, we essentially went from, let's call it 40 to 75 employees. So, you know, how do you hire, you know, 35 people in the middle of a pandemic and train them and have them working safely at the facility? It's a lot of questions that a lot of licensed producers are trying to find the answer to.
So what have you put in place to keep your employees safe? Because certainly, you know, we've talked about how there's kind of that anxiety, and it's really important, really for any business, right? That your employee base is motivated and happy and feels safe, and, you know, they want to do a good job, and they feel good being there. So what are some of the things that you've put in place to kind of help with that? Because I think it's really important.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you know, right at the beginning of the pandemic, the number one thing is our employees' health, and people need to feel safe at work. And, you know, we saw that firsthand, you know, at the very beginning of the pandemic with a lot of, you know, a lot of what was going on in the media. You know, people were just freaking out, and, you know, does much work get done when people are freaking out and not feeling too good, you know, about things? You know, it's got nothing to do with work. I mean, absolutely not. So as employers, it's our responsibility to, that's the bare minimum. So what we've done is a few things. So first off, in production, if you're in a room and you're closer than 6 feet from another employee, you're wearing a mask. If you're in the hallway, you're wearing a mask. You know, change rooms, wearing a mask. In the office, unless you're in your office by yourself, you have to wear a mask. We're taking temperatures every morning. If anybody is feeling remotely sick, they're asked to stay at home and get tested. Living in the province of Alberta, we're actually really lucky that testing for COVID happens quite a bit. I read a statistic recently that 25% of the population of Alberta, or about a million people, have been tested for COVID at this point in the pandemic. And it's actually quite simple. So, you know, you call in, you get booked for an appointment in 2 days, 2 more days, you get the results. So, you know, if you're not feeling well, or if you have somebody that you know up to 2 degrees of separation, we're asking to stay home, go get tested, don't come back. That has happened to us about 20 times, and luckily none of the employees have come back positive for COVID. Another thing that we're doing is we're doing staggered start, lunch, and stop times for different function of the business. And we also rented a trailer where in our parking lot we've got an additional lunchroom that is also being used as a boardroom for the operational team too as well. So those are some of the things that we're doing to keep our employees safe.
That's good. And it's like you said, it's one of those things where if people don't have to worry as much about that, then they're going to do a better job, right? And it's got to be kind of paramount. One of the things we also talked about was supply chain. Now, I think your company is one of the ones that sort of planned ahead a bit and made sure that they had supplies on hand for when the pandemic hit, but maybe you could kind of expand on that one a little bit.
Yeah, I guess it was, you know, I came from business consultant before, and I've had supply chain interruptions specifically from China in the past. So I've been kicked in the nuts before with that. So I was a little bit prepared, maybe more than others, but actually specifically to the packaging, we've got great packaging, and, you know, packaging comes from China. So we actually saw the virus in December, and we ordered, we never thought that it would come to North America. The thinking was that the supply chain would be interrupted in China. So we actually got 6 months of packaging on hand. So that, you know, that was something we did on the packaging side of things. You know, likewise with some of our growing media, you know, nutrients, you know, there's definitely, you know, inventory levels that have to be looked at, you know, all the time. And our, you know, minimum inventory level, like our reorder point has definitely increased, you know, just because we're anticipating more. I mean, things like, you know, masks, sanitizer, hair nets, Tyvek suits, these types of things, you know, took longer to get in, and they're, you know, and you need higher inventory levels. So it's a, you know, now it's a cash flow, you know, issue here as well. You know, this isn't specific to COVID, but, you know, the cannabis industry has gone through these supply issues before. You know, I've got a story from back in 2016 or 2017 where it took me 6 months to get a order of pre-rolls with my name on it. You know, so imagine the look on my face when they say, yeah, that's perfect. It'll be 40 grand. We'll get it to you in about 6 months, you know, and you're running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and it just can't happen. But such is the life of someone in a new and exciting industry.
This is true because everybody's running 1,000,000 miles an hour. So a 6 month delay is just not going to happen, or not
Totally.
Right. So one of the things that you touched on was definitely having insight to your industry, your inventory levels, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, with reorder points, being able to plan ahead and having visibility into some of that stuff can really help you. And then you can predict some of that cash flow, right? Being able to predict when you'll need those things and plan ahead and order things that may have a longer lead time or may have challenges and know where they come from is going to be really important. So, and
from the inventory too, I would look at like the supply inventory, but then also the cannabis work in progress inventory that are in the different stages of the production cycle. And in trying to understand, you know, well, you can have this product, you know, it's growing, you can't stop that. Drying, you can't stop that. You know, where we can get, you know, flexibility is in curing, you know, which would impact curing pre-trimming or post-trimming, curing pre-packaging, because you know, as you said, the cannabis needs to be fresh. So, you know, how long can you let those levels build, and, you know, until you need people to jump all in over it, so that they don't get dangerously high while maintaining, you know, the health concerns that we had for our employees.
Yeah, so let's use that as kind of, you know, looking forward, right? I think it sounds like you've had to make a lot of not only changes to the way that you produce, but it's given you some good insights into which things you can change and which things you can adapt and which things have to stay constant. So I think
Yeah.
you've changed kind of your approach and how you actually manage production, manage storage, inventory, all that kind of stuff based on learning the limits of what can change and what can't. So that's kind
Yeah.
of, I guess, a silver lining in a way, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really forced us and it pushed us to the limit of what we were capable of as a production facility, I believe. And it, you know, trial by fire, I truly believe that it forced us to be far better operators than we were before the pandemic. You know, and as supply and demand fluctuates and as new capacity comes online for us, I think that we're going to be, you know, well positioned and have the understanding as an organization of how to get through the fire.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, that's what I expect to see, right? If we can make it through some of these trials, it's kind of forged by fire. I guess it makes you stronger in the end, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, your outlook is pretty positive overall. I think you've gone on to expanding your footprint, your operation, your employee base. So, you know, it sounds like you've maybe learned some lessons that have allowed you to continue on, even though your plans got put on hold or delayed a little bit. What does the future look like for you now?
Well, our second phase is fully opt and operational. We are expanding into new markets in Canada. We are expanding into new formats and product offerings. Yeah, we're excited. I mean, the future looks really bright. There's definitely a lot of hurdles on the, you know, supply chain, like distribution, level of retail stores, you know, really all the stuff that the government kind of stuck their nose into trying to control. I'm a little bit more, I guess, free. Maybe, you know, I think that we could do a really good job as industry participants. But, you know, there are a lot of hurdles. But if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And it wouldn't be, you know, as there wouldn't be as big of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I believe.
This is true. And I mean, a lot of people thought it was easy, but a lot of those people are kind of no longer in business, unfortunately, right? It's not as easy as
it
was at the beginning. A lot of people thought it would be, but
the hardest thing I've ever seen.
Definitely. So thanks so much for, you know, sharing your story and your insights with us. It's really appreciated. Now I'm going to wrap it up by talking about CannaBusiness ERP and about NexTec. And then at the end of that, we'll open it up for questions. And I'm sure a lot of you will have further questions for Darren and all his insights. So NexTec as a company has been in business now for more than 25 years, and we have 600 customers across multiple platforms. So we are a solution provider. We have multiple technology platforms, but we do tend to specialize in heavily regulated industries. So certainly a large percentage of our customer base is in the cannabis industry, but we also have customers in adjacent industries that are regulated as well. So food and beverage, definitely agriculture, pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, that kind of thing. And that serves us well because there are some commonalities between those industries. When you look at things like GMP standards and that kind of thing, they actually span some of those industries and help us understand what's needed. We do have a very high retention rate. So Our customers stay with us for a fairly long time, and we tend to want to nurture and grow that relationship with them. So we do view it as a true partnership. And again, we invest in our people and their understanding of the industries that we work with so that we can add value above and beyond that of product, right? Now, we do invest in the product. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's something that with those two things together, it gives us more added value because we can understand sort of the real world challenges that come along with this. So we do have customers all around the world. We're doing business now in 12 countries, mostly in North America, but we do have clients, of course, a lot of them in this space that are expanding worldwide as well. And 50% of those clients actually chose us after working with an alternate provider. So not only do we keep our clients for a long time, but a lot of them have come from other providers, failed implementations and things like that. So we can help them through and kind of get them to the finish line. Now, our product that we're talking about today is CannaBusiness ERP. Now, this is a true ERP solution. So it's built on the platform of Sage X3. And what that really means is that you can manage your entire business in one place, right? All of the different parts of it are integrated together. So as we talked about before, having information and having visibility to some of those things like inventory, finance, cash flow, profitability, all of those things, when you're able to group them all together and see the bigger picture, allows you to really run your business in a different way. And that's important as we move into this phase of the industry where investors are looking for that optimization and profitability. So we also support quality and safety, which is of course very important in this industry, right? Compliance. So things like EU GMP or state or Health Canada regulatory reporting, right? We do have a number of customers that are EU GMP certified as well. And then you can also manage your cultivation and production in the same place. So having access to all of that information and seeing how it all works together is really what an ERP is all about. And that's really what our solution does for you. So rather than having pieces that don't really talk to each other or offering kind of this point solution approach, everything is integrated, and it means that you get insights that you wouldn't otherwise. I did mention that we continue to invest in our product. So it is something where it does have a roadmap. We're continually investing, adding new features, functionality, things like online help that are also updated to provide context and assistance for some of those features and to really make that customer experience better. And then finally, you know, an ERP can contain an awful lot of information. And there certainly is a lot of information that we can capture and gather. But to really bring it all together and see it in dashboards so that you can see some really good insights into your business is important. So it kind of finishes off the story of the solution. We do have a lot of customers, both in Canada and in the US, and those customers tend to range from kind of your smaller producers, right? So single location, more of a startup mode, all the way to some of the largest cultivators and producers in the world, both with multi-state and also multi-country operators. So with that, we're going to wrap that up and we're going to open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you both, Jennifer and Darren, for that really comprehensive presentation and really giving us so many real world examples of what this solution can do for your business. You know, we all find ourselves in crazy times these days. So it's really great for you all to have showcased such a session that's relevant to everybody and can show, you know, what your solution can do for them. We do have a few questions that have been posted to the Q&A board. So we've got about 10 minutes left in the hour. So again, as I've been saying inside the chat window, do not miss your opportunity to get your questions answered directly by this panel of experts. So we're going to dive right into Q&A now, but if you have any additional questions, post them to the board and we'll field them as they come in. All right, perfect. So first question that we got was from Mark Gibbons, came in earlier. He asked, can you provide insights about how your inventory management and costing has developed as you have grown? I think that might be geared
That's
towards
for
you.
Darren.
Holy smokes. I'd say really the first one is just drilling down and thinking about it in different stages. At the beginning, we looked at it more from a grow perspective and the different stages of growing. So whether it's mother, veg, or flower. But I'd say particularly because of COVID, it got us really, thinking about the inventory levels now from, post-harvest. What's in cure, pre-trim, what's in cure post-trim, and then how long is it going to be able to take us to go from, a finished bulk product into a jar and then out the door. So I think, that's one thing. So looking at it from, really about 6 different stages, 7 different stages through the process. And then on the costing, there's been a little bit of an increase in the kind of the per gram to get it out the door, due to some of the things, increasing labor, maybe not being quite as efficient because having minimal staffing levels, but just always trying to drive that down lower. And if you have information, then you've got a baseline, and then you can keep trying to drill it down and go from there. But it's something to focus on all the time, that cost per gram.
Yeah, and I can imagine that having one all-encompassing system that data can feed into and be analyzed would be very beneficial. Perfect. So we got another question from Clarissa. Clarissa, by the way, is our head of business development. So in case you've been chatting with her in the chat window over the session, she's the head of our sponsorship program. So if you have any questions about learning more about membership or sponsorship of upcoming sessions, please do reach out to Clarissa following the session as well. But Clarissa is also an expert on many cannabis industry topics as well. So she's posted a great question here, stating, the infused products vertical is one predicted to grow quite a lot. How can companies prepare to position themselves ahead while regulations still evolve, even on CBD?
Well,
holy smokes, I think that's you, Jennifer.
that's a big one. Yeah, certainly with these kinds of things, it's been a challenge, I think, for the entire span of the industry on how to start to put products together in this uncertain kind of regulatory atmosphere, right? And even when we think we have regulations, chances are they're not fully fleshed out. They're kind of gray, they can change. And so people are really trying to do their best to interpret them and adapt to them as they go on. Now, in terms of entering a new market though, right, there's always things that you can do aside from that, and in spite of the regulatory uncertainty, to allow you to have a more successful business model, right? So from a production side, if you're looking at infusing, there's a lot of work that you can do to get those products ramped up and ready and understand the impact of the infusion in terms of how all of your ingredients are going to work together. What's the impact of the processing on those different compounds and that kind of thing, right? You can also invest in learning how to run your production line as efficiently as possible. How do we minimize waste? How do we make sure that we're making a profitable product, right? So a lot of that is kind of outside of the infusion side of things, right? It's making sure that you've got a business model in place that can manage that type of product and that type of demand, and understanding where that demand is going to come from. So, our customers that have kind of dealt with this in the past, and we have some customers in geographies that have started up before legalization has been official or well-defined. Really what they do is kind of make assumptions in a lot of cases, right? So you can take precedent from other geographies or other regulations, but there's always going to be that gray area. And it seems that some of that is open to interpretation, even after it becomes legal or even after some of those regulations are built. So I think you just have to be prepared to be adaptive, to be flexible, to be able to pivot quickly, and to be able to react to some of those new changes, right? Always keeping on top of them and always making sure that you've got a plan in place to be able to mitigate the associated risk.
Yeah, fantastic. I think being adaptable, flexible, and really being able to pivot is a key takeaway from today's session. So really appreciate that fantastic answer to our final question that we just received. So looks like we're running out of questions on the Q&A board. Let's give it another 5 to 10 seconds or so, see if we've got another one that's going to come in here. I'm going to, while we're waiting on that, why don't I activate this end of session poll for all of you all, gauging your interest in learning more about CannaBusiness ERP. I see Will Stevens there in the chat window, the COO and of a cultivation and harvesting and production facility that's coming online soon, expressed his interest in learning more. So really excited to see those business connections being made here. So looks like we're running out of questions here. I'll let this poll go over the next few moments while we go into our outro process for the program. So why don't we give a big virtual round of applause to Jennifer Spanos and Darren Brisbois for presenting this fantastic session today. If you enjoyed today's session, why don't you raise your hand in the audience poll? We'll get all these nice little pop-up notifications on our screen, seeing that everybody enjoyed themselves. Awesome, perfect. Okay, and with that, so again, thank you, Jennifer and Darren. You all can leave the virtual stage now by stopping your videos and muting your microphones. I'll take back over the screen share here. And let's wrap today's session up with our usual preview of some upcoming programs that NCIA is going to be partaking in over the next few days, as well as our end of event member appreciation credit sequence. So again, thank you again to Darren and Jennifer. If you have any additional questions for them, please feel free to utilize this contact information that you can see here. We'll be sending over a PDF of this presentation, as well as the corresponding slides from Jennifer to all the registered attendees upon your completion of a post-event attendee survey, which you should be all directed to after this meeting room wraps up and closes. So please make sure to complete that survey, letting us know how you thought today's session went, and you will be the first to receive the PDF presentation, and which you can use to follow up with Jennifer and Darren directly. So in case you missed the announcements and news over the last few weeks, we are right in the middle of our fall Cannabis Caucus Cyber series. The Cannabis Caucus Cyber events are a one-of-a-kind virtual experience crafted just for NCIA members to partake in. These events will connect you with both our federal and regional policy efforts coordinated by our GR team and all of our allied association members across the country. Tonight's edition is actually kicking off in just under an hour, I believe, at 5 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be focused on the Pennsylvania region. And in light of our typical government relations update that we provide, we will be foregoing that for a really special fireside chat conversation between our government relations team, Michael Correa and Michelle Rudder, and sitting Congressman Brendan F. Boyle from Pennsylvania's 2nd District. So if you haven't registered for that today, please head to NCIA's website, log into our community hub, into your member profile, and claim those tickets over the next hour so that you can secure your spot before that event kicks off. And then if any of these remaining events in the series over the next week and a half are of interest and you're available, please do secure your space today. All right, and with that, I want to give another big virtual round of applause and thank you to all of our panelists, participants, and NCIA member businesses that participated today. Huge thanks to NexTec Group and CannaBusiness ERP for sponsoring today's service solutions session. Again, if you have any more interest in learning more about NexTec Group's products or services, specifically the CannaBusiness ERP, please do head to their website and reach out to Jennifer for more details and schedule a meeting with their team to talk about pricing. We're going to wrap up today with our typical member appreciation credit sequence. So stick around for the next 2 minutes. We're going to have a nice little credit sequence featuring a background track from our Colorado-based musical partner, Kyle Liss. He's going to be performing at a number of the Cannabis Caucus cyber events taking place over the next few weeks as well. And with that, thank you all so much. We look forward to seeing you at another Industry Essentials educational webinar program coming up next week and hopefully this evening at our Pennsylvania Cannabis Caucus cyber event. Thank you all so much.